Recording. So Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Habibi Sam, كيف الحال اليوم?
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته. بخير الحمد لله. Jazakallah khairan for having me on, bro. It's a pleasure to see you.
Good, man. Likewise. So I just want to give this little preface for anyone who's watching. So if anyone decides to start learning Arabic and they're to look on the YouTube resources, they will find yourself. And that's how you and I know each other. I was an Arabic student. I was going through all of the different Arabic teachers and I came across yourself. And, you know, from going from that transition from being a fan, watching your videos and learning Arabic from you to actually like kind of being a friend and we talk to each other. I feel like you're the exact same in the videos as you are like in conversation. I felt like when I went from being a fan to being your friend, I felt like nothing really changed on my side because
I'm
you're
really
just
happy to hear that, you know. I'm really happy to hear that. Like so often you hear about kind of YouTubers and stuff where like they have kind of, you know, hidden stuff in their closet, perhaps maybe where like they're not entirely genuine in front of camera and stuff.
Sure.
And I think for me, like my kind of prerequisite whenever I press publish on a podcast episode or a YouTube video, my only real prerequisite for me publishing it is, was it authentic? Like, was it genuine? You know, like even in most of my content, and most people can probably tell, like the main thing I really focus on isn't kind of having a big studio and having like amazing production value and stuff. I think there's plenty of places on Netflix and on Amazon Prime where people can get that. But like a lot of the time when people come to YouTube and other social media and look for content, they're looking for people who just put out something that's true to themselves a lot of the time. There's a real hunger for that. So like I didn't sort of let in the very beginning where like I was first starting out creating little Arabic videos on YouTube and stuff, or even like Somali videos I did really early. Like I never kind of let that be a barrier for me. I thought like if you've got a personality, you're willing to be authentic and you're willing to just try to solve people's problems and help them learn, then there's a space for you. And it's been a really awesome journey, you know, coming to this point now where I've maybe been doing this for like 5 years now. And
wow.
There's a real kind of you know, a community, maybe even we might see even like a tribe of people who have kind of come around my content and stuff. And it's a pleasure to have you as part of that as well. So
yeah, well, I'm honored. And yeah, as I was saying, like you're the exact same. I feel like kind of that transition was so seamless to me. Like I felt like I already know you. But the way we met is I purchased some of your courses, which are absolutely fantastic. And I think on your website, you actually have a testimonial from me saying how good the course is. And for anyone who's interested in learning Arabic, you have a course which is the Arabic in 60 steps. And it's so plain and easy to follow. And I think, see, with learning a language, like learning a language is a massive commitment. There's a lot of stuff to learn. There's so many different parts of the language. Like there's no way you can learn a language and it's not going to be a massive investment of time. So I think, see, making the investment into a course where it gives you structure, it just makes all the difference. And, you know, to this day, I think your course is the best Arabic learning resource on the internet as far as I've seen. I think it's absolutely fantastic. So anyone who's looking to learn Arabic should get on that. But from me joining the course, you know, we created this dialogue and I've kind of come to realize how interesting your story is. So, you know, I wanted to learn a bit today about where you come from and your whole transition to becoming Muslim, deciding to learn Arabic, which I think is considered the 4th most difficult language in the world. So much to the extent that you became a teacher and, you know, just everything that followed that. So I guess we'll start with where you're from and where you grew up.
Okay, so I was born in a little town in the Midlands called Northampton. That's where I was actually born. That's where my family all come from and everything. But we moved to Cornwall when I was about 11. And for anybody who hasn't been to Cornwall before, or any of the international audience, Cornwall is basically like it's like a package holiday for white middle class people. It's like the whole of Cornwall, pretty much, especially where I'm from anyway, is very, very homogenous. Like it's very white, English, Christian, fairly I'd say conservative culturally, I guess. Like people from the countryside in any environment tend to be a little bit more that way. But yeah, so I grew up in the countryside in like a really safe sort of environment, and you know, and I think it got kind of interesting for me maybe when I was about 14. Like I wasn't good at languages growing up, right? Like I was never really good at languages. Like at school, my teachers like labeled me as being dyslexic, and I was tested for that later, and I am dyslexic. And you know, when I was at school, basically when I wanted to learn language, because I was always interested in other people from other cultures, and you know, and in that environment, it was only really learning French at school or learning Spanish at school. And my French teacher was like, look, it's a lost cause, really. you should just focus on learning English properly because you can't spell.
Wow.
So she was quite blunt about that, even to my mum when my mum came in to talk about it. And yeah, so like I didn't do a language GCSE at school, which is like really rare. Like in this country, most people have to do a languages GCSE. Like that's, you've got to be particularly bad at languages to get away with not doing a languages GCSE. Wow. And I was one of that small percent who weren't allowed to. But when I was about 14, we had this like school exchange thing. Well, I went to New Zealand. I went to New Zealand on the school exchange thing when I was about 14. And you know, like there was something in particular that really had a big impact on me. I don't know if I've ever talked about this before in any of my content, but when I went to a boys' school in Rotorua, they do this like welcome ceremony where they perform the haka. You've probably seen that in the rugby and stuff.
Yeah, I know the haka.
Like, I'd never seen the haka before, but when I watched them do it, I thought, man, whatever I do in my life, I'm going to come at it with that enthusiasm. Like, even though I didn't know anything about the Maori culture or anything like that at the time, I just thought, man, like us humans are capable of putting some energy into stuff. Like, you know, so I thought that I had an interest in languages, and on this kind of this journey to go out to New Zealand, like Rotorua, especially where I was living, is very multicultural. Like out there, like at school in New Zealand, it makes sense at school to learn Japanese and Chinese and stuff because they're closer to those countries. But obviously we're here in the UK, we learn like French and Spanish, languages that are similar to ours. And I remember when I was at the school seeing the sixth formers who are, you know, for those of you who don't know that term, it's like 16, 17, 18 years old, doing like public readings in Chinese and Japanese, like people who look like me, and just seeing those sounds come from those faces kind of just blew my mind when I was about 14. And I thought, like, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna dedicate myself to learning a language, even though I've been told I shouldn't be good at it. And you know, so it's kind of at that point when I decided, look, I'm just gonna teach myself. If no one's gonna teach me, I'm gonna teach myself. So I started teaching myself Spanish at that point, and then went on to do Spanish at A-level, and that's why I was allowed to do an Arabic language degree. And it was when I was at college when I came across Islam. So it was at college. Go ahead, yeah, go.
I was just going to say, so in this, where you grew up, there wasn't much of Islam around you, so, or was there Islam around you, and what was your kind of introduction to seeing Islam?
Okay, cool. So like, I had never met a Muslim in my life until I had become one. Like, well, no, seriously, right? Like that. You know, subhanAllah, the way that Allah Azza wa Jal can put Islam in the heart of somebody who's just like miles away from where our beloved Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam was born, and where he initially started his message. Like it's yeah. So like I grew up in this little seaside village in Cornwall. I've never met a Muslim in my life, and when I was at college, I was studying world religions. And so I studied many religions. I studied the various denominations of Christianity, as well as Buddhism and Hinduism and Taoism and Zoroastrianism and all kinds of other religions and stuff. And when we came across Islam, we had this assignment where we had to listen to some verses of the Qur'an in Arabic. Like my lecturer sent me this link to like this Qur'an Explorer or whatever it was back then, and just to listen to some surahs of the Qur'an. And sitting in my bedroom, you know, 16 or 17 years old, I remember putting on my headphones. And I remember just what came out of those headphones just blew my mind. Like I remember, I'd never heard of Ayn and Sad and Qaf and Dad and Ra before in my life. Like, not let alone never hearing them. I certainly could have never pronounced them. You know, and when I listened to that, I knew just from the melody of the Qur'an that number one, I'd never need music in my life again. And number two, whatever it was, I needed to learn it and spend my life learning and teaching it.
Really? Well, so see, prior to that point, were you looking for a religion, or what was your kind of religious state prior to hearing that surah that your lecturer sent you?
So I guess just the fact that I was studying world religions, I mean, I guess that's kind of a clue that there was part of me that was open-minded to something. Like, and in fact, I remember even very shortly before that, maybe like a few weeks before that, I remember kind of just making a little prayer. I didn't really know who to or anything. Like I'm from a Christian-ish background, like, like Church of England culturally and stuff background, but my family aren't especially religious. But like, I remember kind of saying like, just kind of saying to God, whatever my understanding of that at the time was, I was like, look, if there's a religion that's true, even if it's hard, just give it to me. Like, even if it's difficult for me, even if I'm going to have to sacrifice, even if I'm going to have to go without things, even if people in my own community, in my village, are going to dislike me for it, just give it to me.
SubhanAllah, you asked and you got it.
Know, you know, and literally, like, that's like a couple of weeks before this before hearing the Qur'an happened, you know. So like, I don't know. Like I never really consciously said to myself, like, I need a religion. Like lots of
Sure.
people go through like a difficult time in their life or something like that. Like that wasn't the case for me. Like I had the happiest upbringing ever. It wasn't like I was desperately kind of scrambling for something. It wasn't like that. It was like Islam came to me, really, rather than that I would have settled for anything.
Can you imagine you didn't make that dua? If like that intuitive part, if you didn't just say, let's just put, I don't know how you did it, if you went on your knees or if you clasped your hands together and you said, you know, if you're out there, imagine you didn't do that. And just this whole journey of teaching, well, I mean, your YouTube channel probably collectively has tens, if not hundreds of thousands of views, how many people's lives you've touched, how many people have become students in your program. Like that's just an you know, and it all comes back to that one dua. If you didn't make that dua, and the reason that I suppose stands out to me so much is often I find myself talking to people about the power of their words and the power of their thoughts. If you have thoughts which are like kind of problematic or kind of negative affirmations, people underestimate the actual impact that can have on your life. Whereas if you're seeing positive things, or if you're curious, and you know, particularly from a religious standpoint, actually clasping your hands together and praying and asking for something, the actual power that has in drawing something to you, and then just the journey it sets you out on. So I really think that's incredible that from this kind of, I don't know if back then, if it'd be accurate to describe you as somewhat agnostic, that somewhat like agnostic dua has kind of resulted in just a total change in direction of your life.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, I'd say two things. I'd say number one, like even like outside of our du'as, how we use language and stuff. Even if you think about the way that I've worded that du'a, like for me to be 16 years old and for me to say, like give me the truth and I'll take it. Like, and I was ready for I was ready for my friends to abandon me. Like I was ready for those repercussions. Like, and for me to use that kind of language when I was 16, like I'm sure there's a lot of 16-year-olds, maybe 26-year-olds, right, who would maybe word that dua in a way. They'd use words that were more negative about that. They'd say something like, "Oh, my situation's just awful. I don't know what I'm doing in my life." Like,
yeah.
but my choice of words, I guess, like I definitely say that to it. But you know, on the other thing that you mentioned, like I often sometimes think to myself, I remember being in Palestine when I was there studying Arabic. I remember being stood in a masjid in Palestine thinking, like, how did we get here? Like, Sam, how did you end up here? Like, look at what Allah has given you.
Yeah,
you know, like if it hadn't have gone this way, like, you know, Allah knows best where, like, I don't know how things might have been or could have been or whatever. But like, if things had gone a different way, I don't know what I don't know what I might have ended up as. You don't know, but you know, I've thought that to myself sometimes. Like, sometimes you can trace it back to one sort of point in your life, and you think, what if that didn't happen? You know, who knows?
Oh, totally. I mean, like, see, one of the worst feelings I think a human can have is like a feeling of powerlessness, and this feeling that life is just happening to them and they have no control. And even if your predicament is undesirable, you don't know what's around the corner. And see, if you're saying negative things like, man, life is just happening to me, or, you know, I could never have this, or I could never have that, or look how happy they are, that's not me, or I'm just not a confident person, or seeing people who are fit or strong and saying, oh, that's just not me, I couldn't have it. You know, these thoughts, you know, if you're just to change some of these thoughts, if you're just to ask for something, like what could come to you in just like a week or 2 weeks could just change, no matter where you are, could just change the direction of your life. So I think that's a really kind of incredible point in that.
No, absolutely, yeah, I completely agree. So at that point, right, if I kind of carry on in like a linear manner from there, where did I get to? So at the moment in the story, I think I'm like 16-year-old Sam sitting in his bedroom listening to the Qur'an. Right?
Just quick question, do you know which surah it was? What surah were you listening to?
Oh, like, so I remember opening Qur'an Explorer and scrolling down them, and I didn't know what any of these names are. I was reading them, I was like, what's Al-Baqarah? Yeah. What's you know, why is there one called an elephant? You know,
yeah.
You know, I've never heard of an alaq. Well, like I didn't know any of these words, so I just went to the beginning, and I listened to Surah Al-Fatiha, and then listened to Surah Al-Baqarah, and obviously I remember seeing on the timer it's like 2.5 hours long, and I remember listening to all of it.
Wow.
I remember listening to the whole of Surah Al-Baqarah, and like obviously then like I kind of approached it the same way I'd approached the Bible in the past. Like the Bible is is very chronological. Like it's written to be like Genesis is in the beginning, this and that, and then at the end there's a book of Revelations, and that's in the end, right? Like it's that's a book. And so coming from that background, I had the assumption that that's how you treated the Quran. So I was like, well, we start in chapter 1, don't we? You know, so I kind of just really fell in love with Surah Al-Baqarah. And I remember going to college, then coming home, going up to my bedroom straight away just to listen to Surah Al-Baqarah.
Wow.
Like, and probably even before I even knew a person could become a Muslim, like, I've never met a Muslim. Like, I didn't even know that you can become one, or if it's something you're just born into or whatever. I didn't know any of that at the time. So like I probably memorized about 10 pages of Surah Al-Baqarah before I even knew that you could become a Muslim. I didn't have anyone around me who could explain that to me. Really. Like I just knew that I loved the Quran and I loved the language that it was in. Like I do remember actually there was one guy who was at my college who was like a friend of a friend of a friend who was a Muslim, right? And like I remember me learning about Islam and my friends were kind of talking about me learning about Islam. And back then it was like a joke that I might become a Muslim. Like it was like a joke to them. Like they thought that because I'm reading the Quran so often and stuff, I might become a Muslim. And this guy never reached out to me. Like this guy, he never ever even reached out to me. And like 3 years later, I remember going to the masjid. Like I've been studying Arabic at uni for a couple of years by this point. Like I went to the masjid. I was the one delivering the khutbah, right, at the masjid at this point. And he was there. Afterwards, it's like, I didn't know you're Muslim. I was like, no, thanks to you. You saw me at college all that time and never thought to like just have a chat with me. Because I suppose you could also, I never approached him either. But I guess like just looking at it from my perspective now, like if I was in that position now, like I'd rush for that opportunity to talk to someone who was interested in Islam and stuff and give them correct knowledge, because he would have saved me some issues perhaps, because when you're new to Islam and people challenge you on it, especially like an environment where I grew up, like you feel pressured to talk about things you don't really understand. Do you know what I mean? Like people will come to you and be like, well, what about the Twin Towers? Well, what do you mean? What do you mean by that? Like people will expect you to kind of explain things that you're really not equipped for. And, you know, so that was really hard for me to deal with. Whereas it would have been nice for someone who's been a Muslim their whole life to just kind of put their arm around me and say, look, you don't have to know everything. Like it's fine for you just to say, I don't know, I'll try to find out for you. Like it's, you know, it would have been good if someone had kind of done that.
Sure. So see, you heard the Quran, you love the Quran, you're coming home and you're listening to Baqarah, but what about studying, like, I suppose this is all in a language that you don't know, but what about the kind of affirmation of the belief and thinking that this is from God and learning about the story of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you know, taking Shahada, meeting Muslims, what were the other things surrounding that allows you to solidify your faith?
Yeah, so us being sent that assignment for us to listen to some verses of the Quran and write about them, like that is in the context of us doing a whole term on Islam.
Okay.
Right, that's in the context of us doing that. But like my lecturer, she wasn't a Muslim, and she would admit that she's not a world religions teacher. Like she's a philosophy of religion teacher, really, that had kind of been thrown into a religious studies class to teach world religions, but it wasn't really her thing. So so that was interesting. But it was to answer the question, though, it was in the context of a whole term where we're learning about Islam. So I was familiar with ideas like what Tawheed is, what like the pillars of Islam are, what the core beliefs are, and things like that. Like I was familiar with some of those fundamentals. And then in addition to that, like I was really blessed, I suppose, with just what YouTube gave me. Like I was given good, like authentic information from YouTube in my learning of Islam. Like it's like thinking back at it could have been anything. Like you're so vulnerable in many ways, like when you first come to Islam and stuff. But
which YouTubers were you watching?
That's a good question. I remember, I don't know if he even creates content anymore. There was that guy who goes by the name like Dawah Addict. I don't know if he even creates content anymore.
Okay, I don't know.
And then and there's a couple of other. It might have been like Yusuf Estes and loads of guys who do Dawah and stuff. Like loads of those guys.
I like him.
But I don't remember all of them specifically really at the moment. But.
So what about when you took Shahada? When did that happen, and how much longer was that after listening to the Quran?
Yeah, so this is my first year at college, and then in my second year, I hear that there's like an evening Arabic course at my college, and the person teaching the Arabic course was a Lebanese woman, and she knew about our mosque that we had in Cornwall, because I didn't even know that there was a mosque in the whole of Cornwall. Like like I've never seen a Muslim in my life other than like one guy who I knew was a Bangladeshi who was like a friend of a friend of a friend, right? So like I didn't even think that we had a mosque in Cornwall. I thought there'd be like one or two mosques in the whole country, and to be a mosque, it needed to be like a big place with a dome on top and stuff.
Sure.
But she told me that there was a mosque / Islamic center, maybe, I don't know, 20-minute drive from my college, but like an hour from my house. And and there was a guy who would teach me the Qur'an there. A guy called
I just want to say that's incredible. You had to travel 1 hour from your house to get to the mosque. Because, just it reminds me of how blessed I am in Glasgow. The fact that I can pretty much go outside my house and within 15 minutes I can walk to like 3 or 4 different mosques.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, like in Cornwall, like if you go to Jumu'ah, most people who are there have driven like an hour to an hour and a half to be there.
Wow.
But Cornwall is like that. Cornwall's just so spread out. Like Cornwall it's an enormous county, but there's one very small city, and then most people live in like little fishing or farming villages, like I did. So like it's just so spread out. So it's that's just what it's like in Cornwall. So it's a big, it means that Jummah is really important because most people can't get there for like daily salah. Do you know what I mean? Like it means that the Jummah is really, really important. And so I used to go there on Saturdays, and there was a guy who would teach me the Qur'an there. He was an Algerian guy, and he had ijazah in the Qur'an. He was a hafiz of the Qur'an, and he had ijazah. And he gave me a lot of his time. Like we did a lot of Qur'an together, and with his help, like, yeah, I mean, probably by the time I went to uni, I probably memorized maybe 4 or 5 juz at that point. That he helped me through. So and then it was obviously at that mosque where I took my shahada as well. So it was literally like, so I literally I sat on the floor in the front of that masjid one Saturday when they had their weekend school, and I took my shahada. And then pretty much 2 years later on the dot, when I'd been to university to study Arabic and stuff, I came back and I stood in the same place to deliver the khutbah.
Wow, subhanallah.
Yeah, like that for me, like that was a really nice moment for me.
Wow.
Like not because I'm so great and I'm so deserving of delivering the khutbah, but more that the community trusted in me.
Yeah,
like
sure.
that the community, the people were so willing to have this little white kid, clean shaven, like no beard, little white kid sat at the front of the masjid. And
like that picture on your Instagram yesterday.
Yeah, that's awful. That is awful. But yeah, so like they were willing to have me sit in front of the masjid and say, Ashadu and La ilaha. Like I can't even say out the words properly. And then like 2 years later, they'll let me stand on the minbar and deliver a khutbah. It was it's really cool.
So how did your family take to you joining Islam? And it seems like it was only like 1 year after joining Islam, you traveled to Palestine, right? So
it was a couple of years, but not long, not especially long. Like, so yes.
How did your family react to that? Plus, like, I've kind of expressed to my family that I'd like to go, but they're like, oh, it's dangerous, you need to be careful and stuff, and that's coming from a Muslim household. But I'm just wondering for yourself, from I was living in a culture where Islam was so foreign, how did your family take that? And then the idea of you traveling over to Palestine?
Yeah, like, I'm so grateful for my family. Like, lots of people embrace Islam and they have a really rough time. And lots of people are made homeless and all kinds of stuff after them embracing Islam. But with me, it wasn't like it was a secret from them. I never kept secrets from them. Like I knew that this thing that I was going through was a serious journey for me. And my family initially, I think they just thought it was a phase. Like I'd just get into it, like some people get into rock music or whatever, and then I'd grow out of it or whatever, I guess they thought initially. But because I was going through this journey, I kind of tried to take my family with me. Like I remember in the early stages telling them, like, do you know about this thing Tawheed? Like we were always taught like God's like 3 and stuff. And have you heard of this thing about like Allah being 1? I remember like trying to bring my family on this journey with me. And so they knew for a long time that I was learning about it. It wasn't like everything was normal and I was like having girlfriends and drinking. And then the next day, bam, assalamu alaikum, kayfa halukum. It wasn't like that. The transition wasn't really like that. Like when I came home and I said like I took my shahada today, my dad was like, I thought you'd been a Muslim for months. It was like, what do you mean you took your shahada today? So like it was a real transition. I sort of eased my family into it a lot. It wasn't a big kind of shock for them. But you got to remember as well, like at this time I'm 17, so my big brother is 19, right? And my little sister's 12. So there are ages as well where their reactions to it Like they're not even like fully grown up adults and stuff yet, if you know what I mean. Like my little sister, she's in school, and we're from like a small village in Cornwall. Like it's talk of the town. Like the fact that I'm a Muslim, like, because I used to work in our bakery in the village. I used to make our Cornish pasties and stuff and our bread and stuff. I used to work in the bakery when I was like 16, 17. So like if you work in a place like that and then all of a sudden for breakfast I don't eat bacon anymore and I don't eat sausages anymore and stuff, it's talk of the town. Like people knew I was a Muslim, so people were asking my little sister about it and stuff. Like she's at school, she's 12, like year 8 or whatever, and she's got people interrogating her about her brother being a Muslimic or whatever. And then like my older brother, he doesn't really know how to respond to it. Like he'd just make jokes about it and stuff. Like, and he probably thought that I'd grow out of it and stuff too. But like my dad, especially, had always just been like, look, Sam, you do what works for you and we'll support you in it. If it goes well, that's great. If it doesn't, we'll be here for you. You know, my dad's always just trusted in me and my decisions and stuff. And like it's been harder for my mum. She's never been like aggressive or combative about it at all, but like going to Palestine, for example, like going to Palestine to study Arabic, and even like me moving to London, like moving to London from a little village in Cornwall is a big thing for lots of people, especially I'm going to study Arabic. Like as far as like from like a Muslim perspective, what goes on in London, that's where like Anjam Chowdhury lives, and that's where like all the extremists live. And then like I'm going off to go to London to go and study Arabic and stuff, and then I go to Palestine. And you know, like my mum, bless her, like I entirely understand her position though. Like I completely understand why she's worried and why she's sort of rushed into things and why it's been daunting for her, because she's not really a person who's like, she's always lived a fairly simple life really. Like my parents, they're quite, as I say, quite conservative, quite traditional. Like they got married when they were like 18, had kids straight away, bought a house. My dad's a mechanic. My mum had a nursery. Like very like kind of traditional people, I guess. And then for this to go on with me and myself, and then me getting married young as well. I say young, I was older than what they were, but I guess for our time, I was 22 when I got married.
Okay, that's pretty young.
Well, like for a guy, especially for a man, especially, it's quite young. But like my mum was 18 and my dad was 21, but that was back then. Like that's like in the 80s or whatever. So for them, I think that was fairly normal. But now it's very, very different now. So I don't know. Like along the way, my mum's been really upset about a few things. Not angry with me, but just a bit confused and stuff. But as I say, like I don't resent that at all. Like it's purely from a place of love from her that she and she's always defended me as well, as another thing. Like I know that plenty of the mums and the aunties in our village, like you can imagine what it's like with the sort of things people say to my mum. Like, you know, like I know people have said to my mum, like, are you disappointed? You know, and my mum's response to them has always been like, disappointed. Like my son's married and like he's happily married and he's got children and he runs a business, and like aren't you ashamed of what your son's up to? Let alone my son, like just because my son like has a routine and wakes up early to pray, and because he has obligations and he acts like a grown-up, I should be ashamed of him. Like, you know, my mum's always defended me staunchly like that, and I'm really grateful for my family.
I could see that because you have a video on one of your YouTube channels with your mum, which I watched, and I can tell that your mum has a really solid character. Yeah,
she does. Yeah, she's not a pushover.
Yeah. No, she seems like a really good person, really understanding person, really, so alhamdulillah that you had your family there, which could facilitate that.
Yeah, alhamdulillah.
So you went to Palestine, and then it was afterwards you got married? Yeah.
So
how did you meet your wife?
So it was when I was in Palestine that I kind of realized that I wanted to get married. And when I was in Palestine, I was maybe 21, and you know what, like for someone who loves languages so much, I really don't like traveling very much. Like perhaps it's just because I lean to introversion more than extroversion. I like my home and I like routine and stuff like that. And like my parents, I'm a bit more traditional, I guess. And being in Palestine, being in somewhere so unfamiliar, somewhere completely culturally different, where like none of my friends spoke English or anything like that out there. And but in Palestine, it was difficult to get married, really. Like it's very difficult if you want to settle there. Like it's very difficult. And also like marrying someone there and bringing them back to the UK, that's kind of the opposite of the Palestinian cause, really. Like taking people out of Palestine. So anyway, I kind of had it in mind that I wanted to get married, and when I got back to the UK. Like my wife was studying sign language at a university close to where I was studying Arabic, and yeah, we just met that way, and you know, very early in the process. Like most people have a problem with this when they want to get married, but they don't go about it in a righteous way. Like really, even if you don't have very much, if you go about marriage in the correct way, then like it's likely to work out okay for you. Like really, most families are quite understanding. If you turn up and you say, look, like I'm still a student, but I've got a job lined up, and I want to get married. Like I'm at your door coming to talk to you as her dad or her mum or whatever about this. And that's kind of what it was like, really. Like I hadn't even graduated yet at that point. Like but between my wife and I meeting for the first time and getting married was about 4 months.
Oh, wow.
Right? There wasn't like a big delay or anything at all. So, and we probably talked for like a month maybe before I like went to her house. Yeah, but we were very upfront in the beginning. Like, there's no messing about here. Like, like I want to get married. These are the things that I'm looking for. These are the things that are really important to me. These are some non-negotiables or whatever. And she was the same. And then, you know, she wasn't sick of me after a month, so she let me go around and talk to her dad. And it was really simple, alhamdulillah. Like it, you know, if you're prepared to turn up and say, this is my situation, I'm not here to mess about. This is my situation. It is what it is. You know, like it, and it worked out well, alhamdulillah. Like
alhamdulillah. Yeah. That's amazing. That's really amazing. Well, yeah, that's really fantastic. That was so. It is also one thing I want to say is you seem like a really mature 22-year-old. The fact that, you know, you already had it outside of your mind of no messing around. These are my non-negotiables. I've been to Palestine. I kind of know where I'm going. You know, I think it's actually quite seldom so many 22-year-olds have got their head screwed on in that way.
You know, I think there's something to be said for growing up in the countryside. Like, so sometimes when you grow up outside of a city, you're used to your life not being quite so pampered and stuff. Like if you live in a city, you can quite often get what you want whenever you want. Like things are very convenient for you, but you develop some kind of old school resilience and stuff, I think, really, when you grow up in the countryside. And being from quite a traditional family, like my mum and my dad had me working when I was like 13 or 14. Like when I was 13, I think they had me working in this hotel, just washing up in the hotel. And then like they had me like helping out with the rooms, like washing and cleaning and stuff for the rooms in the hotel and stuff like that. And like that's very common where I'm from in Cornwall. Like in the villages where we're from, they're very touristy, especially in the summer. Like if you've got kids under the age of 15, you send them out to work in one of like the hotels or the cafes or the restaurants or something. And that's how I ended up working in the bakery as well. But it's very common in the village where I'm from to like put your kids to work from quite a young age. And like that certainly played a part in it. And then just the fact that I moved out when I was 18, like a lot of people who go to uni, they still live at home and stuff. Like I'd lived on my own, and I'd lived in Palestine for a year and stuff. Like there was a few experiences, alhamdulillah, that I'd had when I was, you know, in my late teens and early 20s that a lot of people need until they're 30 or whatever to develop, if you know what I mean. I'm not saying it's perfect for everyone to get married when they're that young. Like, believe me, I wasn't established financially in the way that's like perfect, but that wasn't the most important thing for us, even really. Like my wife, she wanted someone first and foremost who was like practicing his religion, like, and she had some non-negotiables on that. And then there's the fact that we understood our responsibilities, even if we weren't in a position to fulfill them fully immediately. Just the fact we understood them, that we were working towards the same kind of thing. But that made it work out, alhamdulillah.
You know, see this non-negotiables, I think this is a really interesting topic because I've seen a lot of relationships, you know, boy meets girl, girl meets boy, they kind of, there's that initial attraction there, and, you know, they're going to the cinema, they're going here, they're going late night drives and stuff, and they kind of go down this kind of pathway, and they're like, yeah, we should get married eventually, but then you realize, oh wait, but she wants to go and live there, or she wants this kind of husband, or this is what she wants for her children. And the guy is like, oh wait, I want this. And then that's where the conflict starts to happen. So I think it's a really, really good that you started this with non-negotiables and expectations. So, you know, I'm not married, but from your perspective, do you think, I suppose, maybe a mixture of what you did and what advice would you extend for what should people look for as for non-negotiables or expectations? What should that conversation look like in order to, I guess, I guess to encourage the marriage being successful, because alhamdulillah, you're only talking for 4 months before marriage, and by the will of Allah, it seems it's been pretty successful. So what things would you kind of, I guess, suggest to other people to have in that discussion?
That's such a good question, you know. Like these days I spend a fair bit of time on TikTok, right? Like that's a new platform that, you know, is kind of popping right now. So like I spend a lot of time on there, right? And there's among the Muslim youth, it looks like what their non-negotiables are from like a woman's perspective is like, you can afford my 50 grand mahar. You know, you're going to let me work and pursue whatever job I want. And you have no standards at all for what you want me to do. Like, and then on the other side, what men expect from women is like, you know, you better be like this young, you better be like this beautiful, you better like come from this kind of family. But it's all, that's all backwards. Like it's completely backwards. Like that you've got to think about, you're a team with this person. You're a team with this person building a home to raise children, right? Like in the conversations that I've seen from generally young people, like by young, I mean like under age 25, I haven't seen anybody having the conversation about how do we foster a team that's good for building, for good raising children, right? Like, so some things that I would say is general competence. Okay, one thing you should look for is you should be assessing their general competence. Do they know how to respond to emails? And do they know how to pay their bills? Do they know how to, do they even know what council tax is? Like, do they know like the things that go into running a house, for example, like kind of just general competencies like that. Like, do you, like, if you have a car, let's say like the guy has a car, for example, are you the one who actually takes care of the insurance and you can maintain it and you can change a wheel and like, or do you need your dad to do that for you? Like if there's a lot of things that you need your dad to do for you, like you need to fix those things before you get married, probably, right? Like I'm deliberately saying, like, I'm not saying you shouldn't get married. I'm saying you should spend a little bit of time just fixing those things. So like a general competency. Another thing is communication. Like, if you have an issue with something that's really causing you trouble, are you good at communicating your feelings about something? Like so often people just aren't honest. They're just not honest in the beginning about like, because like through a couple of my YouTube channels, I get a bit more personal. Like I've put out a lot of content on TikTok about this marriage stuff, and people message me. People who are married message me with some of their issues, right? And so many men and women are not being honest with their spouses about what they actually want, like intimately. Okay, so what they want in terms of like their physical, intimate relationship with their spouse. That's causing a lot of problems. Like, are you mature enough to sit down with your partner and be honest about what you actually want? Because unfortunately, a lot of people aren't doing that before they get married because they're scared of putting the other person off, right? You shouldn't be scared of putting the other person off. You should be scared of that person, like that person resenting you because you haven't told the truth 4 years into marriage and you've got a child on the way. That's scary. Like you putting this person off because they're not up to the challenge or they're not up to actually being with you. That's not something you should worry about. You should thrive on that, really. Like in some ways, you should even be looking to kind of unsell people in some ways. That you should communicate really clearly about what you actually want and let them kind of show who is right. So like, yeah, so the first thing I mentioned is general competency in like life, daily life kinds of things, because so often, actually, like so many people are raised in families where they get treated like children, even until they're in their late 20s and stuff. Like, you know, I don't want to get specific, but, you know, so sometimes it's the case with our men, to be honest. Like sometimes our men get treated like princes until they're like in their late 20s. And that's a bit of a problem. Like, you know, from a young age, we need to kind of, you know, from a really young age, like we need to have our children understand what responsibilities are and what their contribution to their family is and how money actually works and stuff like that. Like, I mean, my boys are really young, right? Like Yunus is only really just starting to talk, right? But Yusuf understands that when I'm out, he's the man of the house. I tell Yusuf that. I'm like, look, it's if you hear the adhan go off on mummy's phone, it's time to pray. And like, you know, if you're not reading or whatever, then tell mummy you'll lead her in our salah. Like, look, I'm not saying he's perfect and that he does that. I'm not saying that my 5-year-old does the adhan in the living room and stuff. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that, like, from a young age, we should encourage our boys to be like, to take some responsibility and understand how that stuff works. So those are just two things I think I wanted to mention then. So like having good communication skills, and then also just what is the general competency in, you know, day-to-day life stuff.
Yeah, you mentioned one which was like not being afraid to, what was the wording you used, to unsell someone? Is that the wording you use? I think that's a really good point, because I see too, well, I have seen with, you know, guys trying to create relationships with girls, it's all about supplicating and oh, I like this. Oh, you don't like it? Well, you know what? I don't like it that much either then. You know, and
Okay.
it's
Right.
kind of creates this, I don't mean this literally, but I suppose like in character, this kind of, it makes you like flaccid. Your character, like you should be grounded in what you like, and I think people underestimate the value in that by becoming yes men and supplicating and about what she wants and bending yourself too much, and it creates a, you know, again, like that dishonesty, which it's not material to build a relationship upon, like, you know, just kind of bending all, you know, all of your desires, what you want, your values based on what, and I suppose this goes either way for the males or the females. I'm just saying in my experience, I've seen guys do it a lot more. They bend their values a lot to more what the woman wants, trying to please her and supplicate to her. And one, it shows kind of a weakness. And I think women are intuitive to this. I think women are intuitive to this. I think when women see these yes men who keep bending what they like in order to please her, I think women intuitively know that they sense a weakness in this person. And I think when women sense a weakness and an uncertainty and an undecisiveness within men, they tend not to trust those men. And I think that is contrary to building a long-lasting relationship.
You know, like, of course, there's some exception and there's some variety in people's personality and stuff, but like there is a lot to be said for that. Men are more attractive when they're on task, like when they're focused on increasing themselves and focused on being a leader in their family. Sure. And we have that responsibility anyway, like just from our religion, like we should understand that men have a responsibility to lead their families. And they, when people kind of acquiesce and don't live up to that, it's not an attractive trait. Like sometimes men in their families, they need to do things that their wives and children maybe don't really like in the short term. So sometimes they need to make decisions about things like that. And, you know, I think just in my experience personally, it's actually attractive for men to have a trait to be able to do that, to be assertive in many ways like that. Like, you know, it's a difficult conversation, you know, I feel like when I've gone down this a lot, like I've ended up getting into conversations that I don't really want to, you know, like I try to keep all my content really sort of innocuous. I try to keep it all really friendly, really kind of educational, really like languages learning based. And there've been times, especially on TikTok, where I've been kind of sucked into rabbit holes of talking about sort of, you know, gender and masculinity and stuff like that. And even though like I've not said things I don't believe in, but especially on certain social media platforms, it's too easy for people to take your 1 minute video out of context entirely. It's very easy for them to do that. So like, I try to recuse myself from conversations that are too deep in that rabbit hole sometimes, just at the risk of tainting the main thing that I focus on most of the time.
Yeah,
which is
of course.
Language learning stuff, you know.
So seeing the language learning stuff, as far as I've seen, you've had a lot of support and positivity, and a lot of, I think a lot of Muslims are really happy to see you come into a religion and become a teacher. And, you know, for me to see someone like you become so good in Arabic and teach it, alhamdulillah, it was really impressive for me to see. But was there ever any hate, or was there ever any resistance you got online from that?
Oh yeah. But like that's nothing beyond what's expected. Like I've always kind of held this kind of principle, right? That's always given me some comfort, is that if the people that are closest to you love you and the people that are furthest away from you don't, then you don't need to worry about it. Like if you've got really toxic, unhelpful relationships and the people who are closest to you try to avoid you and say negative things about your character, maybe you need to have a bit of a look at yourself. But like, so sometimes I have comments on some of my videos that are completely innocent. Like I might have a video about me making tea for my wife, right? And people will come on the video and say some angry, sometimes I wonder if it's even about my video. Sometimes I wonder if they're angry about something else. Like they've got angry about something in their life and they've just thought, you don't make tea like that. They've just come on to my channel and they're not angry about it. So like anything like that, I don't really worry too much about. There are some things that do hurt my feelings, like when people like hate on me for charging money for what I do. Like when people say things like that hurts my feelings, but that's life, isn't it? Like I know people will say things like that. I know that when you put out, because like if you were to look at the amount of stuff I put out into the world, most of it's free. Like most of what I do for the world is completely free, right? And then there's a small slither of that audience who want more. So I give them more in a way that takes care of me. Do you know? like, it's not complicated, is it? Like, that's not a complicated thing that people have an expertise and they charge money for it. But like, it's you know, you can quite easily take it to heart when people say things like that, you know, like people come onto my live stream sometimes, they're like, oh, do we have to pay for this? And make little comments about, like, you know, but really? And to be honest, like, when I actually sit down and think about that, I know it's just silly. Like, I know it is. Do you know what I mean? It's, you know, that really isn't a big deal, but there is stuff like that, of course, but like, I don't let it deter me from the main point, which is the people who really do want to learn of my audience and they enjoy what I do, I'm going to keep on giving it to them.
Yeah, plus see, if you invest money into something, you're going to take it more serious. If you, like, tomorrow made the Arabic in 60 steps free, maybe you would get like 1,000 students who would join it, but of that 1,000, maybe 1 or 2 would actually complete the program. Then something's free, people take it less seriously. Also, I think, you know, as we were talking earlier, the power of words, the power of thoughts. There's also a kind of merit in what you invest your money into, and I think we should kind of take pride and see if someone's made an honest halal business and you're giving the money, like, you know, you're kind of a part of that. And I think people should take a sort of don't know what the word is, a solace or a kind of pride in being able to contribute to something like that, as opposed to contribute money to McDonald's. I mean, like, you know, your course is like, what is it, about £200, £190 or something like that?
Yeah. Just under £200, but it's basically my entire Arabic degree, which I spent like 12 grand on and nearly died for a couple of times when I was in Palestine, right? And I've, like, most of that information, all of the gems of it, I've packaged into like a convenient online program that students can complete on their own terms with my support, right?
There you go. Like, what else could someone ask for? What else could someone ask for, like, a program? It's I said that at the beginning, but I'll say it again. Like, if you're learning Arabic, like, don't even think about it, just buy the program. it's an amazing program.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, I've sent it to so many people, and, you know, I hope, inshallah, people keep signing up to your program, because I think it's just such an awesome resource for Arabic learning.
I'm really proud of it. You know, like, recently I've nearly finished teaching some private students the whole program. Like, I started teaching it in person. Well, let's say in person, like over Zoom, right? To a group of students, and it's been really interesting because they're going to graduate soon. Like, today, I'm doing step 59 with them. So they're out of the 60, they're very close to graduating. And we started in April. So, like, literally in like 4 months. In like 4 months, they're going to complete. Do you know what? It kind of annoys me because they're obviously so much smarter than me, which kind of annoys me because some of the stuff they pick up, I think, man, it took me like months to learn. Wow. So like, number one is they're very hardworking, you know, which is really nice. But it has kind of given me a newfound confidence, I suppose, in the program to witness students going from, like, in the beginning where they know like Alif, Be, Te, up to now. Well, like, I'll show you. Today, I'm about to teach our students one of our final literature seminars, which is a historical text today. And my students will likely read this passage of Arabic. They'll likely read it completely in Arabic and understand 80% of it probably. And this is a historical account from Al-Baladhiri's Futuh al-Buldan, which is a book written in, like, you know, the 7th century or maybe 8th century. You know, and it's a text about the Muslim conquests of various places, and this particular one is about the conquest of Damascus. And you know, to actually witness students of mine, 2 of them are from America, 1 of them is from Malaysia, and to witness them going from, like, as I say, knowing Alif, Be, Te, up to when they have the Arabic language tools because of our program, that, like, now they can literally access, like, Arabic, some of the most advanced Arabic works from, like, the 7th century. It's incredibly humbling, and I'm also so grateful to them. Like, even though I'm the teacher, like, I'm so grateful that they trust my work and have trusted it up until now, because, like, in the middle, in those stages, like, learning any language is a challenge. Like, it requires some effort from the students, and the fact that we've had times in the beginning where, like, we've done a grammar lesson, I've explained something, and they've been like, well, that's mental, but we just trust you because we know we'll figure it out. So, like, I'm immensely grateful to those students as well, and you know, it's likely that they'll graduate probably. So Saturday is when I'll set their exam, and then we'll see how they do.
That's amazing, bro. I just have a couple of wrap-up questions for you.
Oh, cool. Yeah, go ahead.
What's been the most rewarding? So since making your YouTube channel, creating the Arabic in 60 steps, and coaching all of these students through it, what's been the most rewarding part of that?
Oh, that's an amazing question. the most rewarding part has been seeing students graduate the program. Like, I mean, what I specifically mean is not handing them their certificates, but marking their exams.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I set a student the final exam for the Arabic in 60 Steps program, when I receive that and I look at the sort of things that these people are doing, that's some of the most proud I've ever been of my work, like ever, like more proud than receiving my degree or anything like that, graduating myself from my actual degree, like seeing people from all over the world. Like one who graduated recently is a guy called Sam from America. And like when I received his exam paper, like one of the final questions that we do is always a literature reading, and he'd done a poetry reading, and from reading, like he had read this passage of a poem by a poet called Nizar Qabbani, very famous, like modern Arabic poet. And just the fact that through my program, he'd gone from knowing, as I say, like Elif, Ba, Ta, to where he can access like real literature from Arabs is it's amazing to watch that process like that. That's the most proud I've ever been in my work, I think.
Wow, amazing, subhanAllah. Another one is favorite surah or favorite ayah of the Quran.
Okay. So I have two, I guess. So in terms of meaning, there's an ayah in Surah An-Nazi'at where Allah says, أَأَنْتُمْ أَشَدُّ خَلْقًا أَمِ السَّمَاء بَنَاهَا. So yeah, أَأَنْتُمْ أَشَدُّ خَلْقًا. Are you a more severe creation, أَمِ السَّمَاء, or the skies? Like sometimes I just think that's so powerful, because it's what was said to Fir'aun. And sometimes, even though we are not fara'ina, we're not arrogant like that, hopefully, we can all find ourselves becoming like that. Like sometimes when people recognize me at the masjid and stuff, sometimes I get a little bit of kibr in me, if you know what I mean. Like sometimes, you know, people say, I recognize your YouTube channel, I recognize you from this and that. And like, sometimes I just like to read surah of the Qur'an that just humble you like that. Like the ayah, sorry, I was translating it. So what it really means is that, are you a more stern creation, or is the sky? Like, in the sky is something we can almost always see. Like we can always look up to the sky and remind ourselves, like we're pretty small, you know. And then the other ayah, which in terms of its melody, I just think is so nice. It's an ayah from Surah Al-Muddathir, I think. Yeah, I think it's from Surah Al-Muddathir. It's Innaha la'ihdan kubar. I just think it flows really nicely. Innaha la'ihdan kubar. And it means indeed it is the it's one of the greater. It doesn't really mean anything like in and of itself, because it's such a small ayah. It comes in like a flow of lots of different like short ayat. But so I kind of have two. I have one in terms of its meaning and one in terms of its melody.
That's amazing. And two questions left, small ones. One more is, what is a piece of advice you have been given that you never forgot?
So something my dad said to me, he just said, the money will come. Just that, the money will come, right? And it was in the context of how you kind of compromise on what you want. Do you know what I mean? Like if you follow the things that are important, the money will come. Like if you follow the things that you know you're contributing value from, the money will come. You know, and that, it was hard to remember that through like the first, you know, really 3 years of me putting out content. Like really, like we had some financial hardships. Like I don't know if I mentioned to you, like one little one I'll just give you. Yeah, like something I'll never forget is when my wife was pregnant with our first son, Yusuf, and I just started teaching Arabic. Like I was just trying to take as many students as I could to pay the bills and stuff. And like I remember in my bank, I didn't have enough money to withdraw a £10 note, but I had enough money to buy food, but not enough to withdraw a £10 note. And we were driving home. My wife had cravings for chips with all the sauces. That was just her thing. She just wanted chips with mayonnaise and chili sauce and everything. And I pulled over, and I was like, I thought to myself, like, I've married this woman. I've taken her from her family's home, and I've got to look at her and say, I don't have enough money in my bank account to take out a £10 note. Like, it ended up okay, alhamdulillah, because it was quite an advanced chicken shop for the time, and they took card, so she could still get her chips. but to be a man in that position, you've got a baby coming, and you're struggling like that, like, and then to keep on pushing, like, for me to think to myself, the money will come. Like it was we've had some moments like that, but we've just had to stay on task and just do what we had to do.
That's amazing. My last question for you is, where can people find you?
So absolutely everything I do now is now Sam Martin Burr. Okay, so like I have obviously, as you said, the Arabic in 60 Steps program. There's an Arabic in 60 Steps podcast, an Arabic in 60 Steps YouTube channel, and then for the Somali stuff I've done before, there's a YouTube channel called Sam of Somalia. But very recently, like it's really nice timing that you've actually let me come on your platform as well, because I'm making everything just cleaner for myself, more minimal for myself. Like everything's coming into one personal brand. So everything, whether it be TikTok, Instagram, whether it be the website, sammartinburr.com, YouTube channel, like everything is Sam Martin Burr, and that's on Patreon as well. So if anybody wants to follow on Instagram or anything like that, whatever platform you guys are used to, or TikTok if that's your thing, then you can find me on any platform.
Great, bro. All of your links will be in the bio. I encourage everyone to look you up. I also encourage everyone to purchase and go through the Arabic in 60 Steps program. I think it's incredible. So yeah, from the bottom of my heart, bro. شكرا لك من أعماق قلبي. أنا ممتن لك. الحمد لله. اعتني بنفسك وسأراك لاحقا.
Inshallah. Jazakallah khairan.
Take care, my bro.
Okay, take